Every Jewish home will be yeah. So we are up to Daf Chaf Aleph Tamar Aleph, I believe. And we even got a little bit of a head start. Thank you very much. So Zok Tehilin Gemara. Iboilahu. Mahal Lakadesh Yodov Viraglovik. Yesterday we had 4 shilas, and 4 for 4 we weren't able to push. Iboilu Mahal Lakadesh Yodov Viraglov Bekir. We know the proper method of using the kiyar is to allow the spout to drain water down upon your hands and feet. What if you decided you'll be toivel your hands inside the kiyar? Well, would that be allowed? Would that be allowed? The pasuk says, "Barachtu Aaron of mimenu." They have to wash from it, not in it. So mimenu omer achmono v'loy b'seichoi. Even by dipping your hands in the kiyar, that would be a good method. Amar Nachman, but you talk Tashma. Let's see if we could bring a raya. Let's see if we could bring a raya. Toshma. Oy shetoval. We had a brisa that we just brought earlier. Oy shetoval b'mei ma'ira. What if someone, instead of doing kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, he toiveled in the water of a cave, but not the water of the kiyar? V'avad avidos psula. Ha mei kiyar dumi d'mei ma'ira. It's much. The whole problem is not that there was a tefillah. The problem was that it was b'mei ma'ira. It was the wrong body of water. But that same scenario, tefillah in the kiyar, would work. Zok to Gemara loy. It's not true. You're going to ask me. So then, why did it say toivel mei ma'ira? Because of a bigger chiddush. Toivel even in the kiyar, avodas psula, because there's a specific chiddush in mei ma'ira. Mei ma'ira is trichaloi. Shaloi toimar. Kol gufei toivel behen. Madich ma'ira. If you're tummy, if you're really tummy, you could toivel your whole guf, and your guf will become tar. Yodav v'raglav. If you only need to create a tahira for your hands and your feet, like Oshkin, surely mei ma'ira should work. That's a bigger chiddush than kiyar, because kiyar we know at best could only be mitar your hands and your feet. So therefore, maybe tefillah wouldn't work, but the tefillah. You might have a habit to think that tefillah of Yadayim v'Raglayim and Meimar should work. That's where the Brisa, the Bedavka, speak that out. Okay, this is the end of the easy part of the Gemara for today. Amar Abchia, Mei Kiyar Nifsolin Lematirin Kamatirin Leivorim Kevar. Now, there's 2 sets of avodos that you need to make Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim for. All avodos that are only allowed to be done by day. Shchita, Kabbalah, Halachas, Rika, and many other avodas that are done during the day. When does the mayim expire? When does the mayim expire and be possible, Lina? When those avodas can no longer be done. When can those avodas no longer be done? At nightfall, Vashkia. So therefore, the water, Lagabe, being mitayr for those things, will become possible at Shkia. So if the water is not in the ground before Shkia, even if it's placed into the ground 10 o'clock at night and it's there through the morning, you will not be able to use that kiyar water anymore to do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, to do shchita, zricha, kabbalah, all those day avodas. But le'evarim ke'evarim. Evarim, when are you marked here those? All night long until Alois Shachar. So therefore, the expiry of the Mei Kiyar for those types of kiddush yadayim v'raglayim is only at Halois. So it's possible to have water that's kosher for Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim if you want to only be doing Haktorah Sevarim the whole night, yet that Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim wouldn't work for the day avodas because the water isn't qualified. So that's a Chiddush. You can see where the complication is going to start already. Rav Chizda Amar, Rav Chizda said no. Af limatirin, even for avodas that are normally done during the day, the cutoff time is Alois Shachar. Ein nifstolen ela b'amudas shachar. Kevarim. As long as by Alois Shachar the kiyar is submerged in the bar, you don't have any problem. Shkia is not something that we need to worry about. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, but Rabbi Yochanan has a third shita. A kiyar, kivin shishaku, they put it down in the water, let's say before nightfall, right? Ein Malayu, they're not allowed to take it out till the next morning.
People don't have to do anything wrong.
That's not a problem. They could have done Kiddush Yadayim V'Glayim before.
Yeah.
Your question would be, what if someone comes? Well, or that's not obvious. But what if a guy comes in the morning to do Trumas Hadeshin before daybreak? Yeah, so they'll have to take the kier out. Once they take the kier out, it messes it up for everybody. So that's why this is going to get complicated. See, I didn't think of your kasha, so I didn't realize that I hit a brick wall till a couple of lines later. You already hit it now. So Zakti Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kior Kivan Sheshakoy.
Yochanan says once you put it down, but if you didn't put it down,
what it means is you can't take it out.
once you put it down,
It'll be possible right away. Mm-hmm. The whole point is no time during the night can it be out of the water. Zokt Gemara, Lememra, are you telling me the lavoidas laila nami lechazi? So you're telling me a very radical thing that if it's not in the water before Shkia, you can't even make Kiddush Yadayim V'Glayim on it anymore, even just to do a var.
it's in the water. How do you do it?
Well, that's exactly why we're going to have a little bit of a problem. So, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the way we're looking at it now, the guy who wants to be makter Evarim Kalalayla would have to show up before Shkia because otherwise he won't have access to the Mekir. So now we're going to deal with our problem. So let's first lay out all of the different members of Rabbi Yochanan that we're going to be forced to deal with today and place it all in order. So the first halacha we just learned, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Kiar Sheshakai, Shuv Ein Malay. And the Gemara assumes that pshat in Rabbi Yochanan is that Shkia passes the water for any type of kiddush across the board. Okay. Now, before we go back to the Gemara, yesterday we learned two brises on Daf Chof Amud Aleph where Rabbi Yochanan made a comment. So let's look at the two brises that Rabbi Yochanan. It's not a brise. Rabbi Yochanan is an Amoyer. Two comments Rabbi Yochanan made. So I'm looking at Chof Amud Aleph, and I'm looking at the two dots. Was one of the sugars that we learned, something that remained unresolved. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kidesh Yadav Haraglav L'Trumas Hadeshin. He made Kiddush Yadayim V'Glayim L'Trumas Hadeshin, meaning in the wee early hours in the morning when it was still dark. You see already where we're going to have problems over here. He made Kiddush Yadayim V'Glayim, he had to pull the thing out. He made Kiddush Yadayim for Trumas Hadeshin. L'Mochar, in an hour or two, when it becomes light, Ein Tzarech L'Kadosh, you don't have to make a new Kiddush Yadayim V'Glayim. Shekvar Kiddush Mitchila Savoida. You see already how this is going to be a clash. You pulled it out, and now I think it's a good Kiddush even for later. So the Gemara ended up having two pshatim in Rabbi Yochanan. There was a machlokes Rava and Abaye. So let's just read this Gemara because this is going to be very necessary. Leman, who is Rabbi Yochanan saying this halacha according to? Ila Rabbi, if it's Rabbi, Amar Sul Paslalina. He holds that Lina passes even on the avoida. So Oibazoi, the fellow who did Kiddush Yadayim V'Glayim to do Trumas Hadeshin, how could he continue doing the avoida? How could you say L'Mocher and Tzarech L'Kadosh? According to Rabbi, of course, at the lois he has to do it again. And Ila Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, then the whole thing's not like it. He holds there is no such thing as Lina at all. Amar Ein Tzarech L'Kadosh, Afilu Mekan the Saryavam. So who is Rabbi Yochanan referring to? So we had two pshatim yesterday. Amar Abaye. Abaye said La'olam LaRebbe. We're going according to Rebbe. If we're going according to Rebbe, so how come it's not a hard cutoff? Because Abaye says Rabbi Yochanan understood that Rebbe's halacha was only Lina D'Rabbanan. Lina is only D'Rabbanan, and therefore, if it's a whole night before, if you make Kiddush Yadayim yesterday afternoon, okay, that'll be possible come on. But if you just made it an hour ago, Rebbe won't be mad. It's such a short amount of time, loy postulating. So that was one mahalach in Rabbi Yochanan. The other mahalach in Rabbi Yochanan was Rav Amar L'Olim Rabbi Lazar B'Shimoni. We have a problem according to Rabbi Lazar B'Shimoni. There shouldn't be any issue of Lina at all. So Dr. Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan is touching on Rabbi Lazar B'Shimon, but he doesn't fully agree with Rabbi Lazar B'Shimon. V'roya Rabbi Yochanan devar of betchilas avoda v'loy b'soif avoda. You know when he holds Lina wooden parcel? That's only if you made the Kiddush Yadayim V'Glayim an hour ago when it was still dark. So there I'll say there's no Lina. But to say that a Kiddush Yadayim from yesterday should work, there he's not Moed Trebbe. So that's the second shtickle of Rabbi Yochanan that there's a machlokes Abaye and Rav about that we're going to refer to. But there's a third Rabbi Yochanan we learned as well. So this Rabbi Yochanan, I just want to point out is discussing the person. Kidesh Yodav Raglov, does he have to do it again? Now, of course, it involves how do you pull the kir out to do that, but it's directly addressing the person, not the water. We actually had another Rabbi Yochanan earlier on Daf Chaf Amar Aleph, and I'm talking about the third wide line. Amar Rab Ami, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishmei de Ilfa, Kiyar Shaloi Shiku Bi Be'erev. So now we're talking about the water in the kiyar. We're not talking about the person anymore. Kiyar Shaloi Shiku Bi Be'erev, Mikadesh Mimenu Lavoidis Laila. That means you didn't put it in to the water. You didn't submerge it into the bar before Shkia. The water will still be kosher to do Kiddush Yadayim Verglayim for this evening, for being Makter Evorim. Ulamocher Eina Makadosh. And tomorrow, you can't use it anymore. Because Lagabe Yoim, Lagabe Avoidus Shabayoim, Lagabe Avoidus of Heter, it's going to be possible, right? But the Gemara wasn't sure about that. The Gemara said, Vavinumba, Lamocher Eina Mekadesh, Deloit Tzarech L'Kedushay. Maybe it doesn't mean you can't. Maybe water is kosher, except you don't have to make another Kiddush Yadayim Verglayim because you already made at night, which would be like Rabbi Elazar Shimon. Oy Dilma, if Lina, or maybe it's possible Lina. Right? So now we have three members of Rabbi Yochanan. We have the member that addresses the water in the kiyar. We have the Rabbi Yochanan that addresses the person who made Kiddush Yadayim at night, and now we have this third Rabbi Yochanan. And we're going to have to see how they all work together. And that's why this is complex, because we have three Rabbi Yochanan at play. And we don't know if Rabbi Yochanan is working with Rabbi Elazar Shimon or if he's working with Rabbi, because we have different ways of touching them up, as we saw. So yesterday, we got the first level of complication. Today is where it comes full circle. So Zok to Gemara. How could Rabbi Yochanan say, Shuv ein ma'aleyu, lememor de lavoidis laila nami loy hava? That means you can't even use it for at night. We had at the bottom of Chof Amar Aleph, which turned over onto Chof Amar Beis. Now that's Rabbi Yochanan at the top. I'm sorry. Kiyar Shalosh Shaku Mibe'erev Mikadesh Mimenu Lavoidas Laila. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you shouldn't be able to be Mikadesh Lavoidas Laila because it's possible and ganzen once you have Shkia. Ulamach Ein Mikadesh. So Zok to Gemara. Because of this stira, we're going to have to understand Rabbi Yochanan differently. Rabbi Yochanan didn't mean that a shkia becomes completely possible, because obviously makes no sense. So you know what Rabbi Yochanan meant? My eina maleyu nami dekamar lavoidus yoy, aval avoidus laila chazi. Rabbi Yochanan says that once shkia passes, this water is no longer good to be able to make kiddush yadayim verglayim for the day avoidus, but it will still be kosher to be used for night avoidus until alois. Correct. The more it's a very nice part of Rabbi Yochanan, but isn't that exactly what Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef said? Right? Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef says that Shkia is the cutoff for day avoidus, and Alois is the cutoff for night avoidus. So Iyachi, I knew the Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef. So Rabbi Yochanan is addressing, he's commenting on there was Machlokes Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef and Rabbi Chisda, and he offered a third opinion. It's not a third opinion; it's exactly word for word what Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef is saying. Zok Gemara no. There is an afkamina alocha still between Rabbi Yochanan and Shita and Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef, and that is Gezerash Shikua, and that is Dr. Rashi. Tosfos argues on Rashi. You see, it's a long Tosfos, but Rashi learns that very fascinating. Rashi learns, in fact, Rabbi Yochanan holds that the cutoff is in the morning, not by night. The cutoff is in the morning, not by night. So the question is, if the cutoff is in the morning, not by night, which is more similar to Rabbi Chisda, right? The cutoff for everything is in the morning. So it'll be kosher, sai for avodas yom, sai for deslaila, unless it's out of the water by alois. So how come Rabbi Yochanan said, "Ein ma'aleyu"? You got to leave it in the whole night. Rabbi Elazar Lashon he says, "Ein ma'aleyu." Why ein ma'aleyu? It could be out a whole night. Just make sure to get it in quickly before alois, right? Zok Gemara. It's only a derban gzer shikua. You know why you shouldn't leave it out all night? Because what happens if it gets late and it's almost alois and you forget? You forget to put it in. So to play it safe, keep it in all night. If you keep it in all night, then you don't have to worry. So basically, Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef holds that once shkia comes, it passels this water for being used by yom, right? And if you took it out at night, then you could only use it for night. You can't use it for day. Rabbi Yochanan knows no. All night long, it doesn't matter. You can still use it for day as long as by Alois Shachar, which is like what Chissa says, it's immersed in the water because it's Alois Shachar that creates the psolina. So why did he not take it out? It's only Xera. We're afraid if you take it out, you'll forget. The Gemara is going to ask Hakasha. The Gemara is going to ask Hakasha. And one of the reasons why Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's Pshat is the Gemara asked a big kasha. What's the difference between him and Pchia? And when the Gemara says this Pshat, the Gemara doesn't ask right away, what about what your kasha? What's the difference between Pchis and Rabbi Yochanan? That's one of the reasons why Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's Pshat, because the Gemara should have asked exactly what you're asking right now, just like it asked a moment ago on Pchia. But this is how Rashi learns. Now, according to Rashi, the Gemara is going to ask that kasha in a couple of minutes, after a couple of steps back and forth. But Tosfos says the Gemara should have asked it immediately. Okay. So now let's just review what we have. Let's review what we have. So Rabbi Yochanan says, if you have water, keeping shashak yeshuv malayu, that's only midrabanan, so that you shouldn't forget, right? And then when he had the second halacha was, even though it wasn't placed into the water before Shkia, that's not a problem. Mekadesh mimenu lavodis laila. You could make kiddush yadayim v'reglaim lavodis laila, and ulamacher ein mekadesh. You don't have to. You don't have to make kiddush yadayim v'reglaim tomorrow, because your kiddush yadayim v'reglaim at night was good, which means it's going to be following Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon, not Rebbe, because according to Rebbe, you have to make another kiddush yadayim v'reglaim. So this will go according to Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. So everything is good now, but it gets complicated because we have a third stickle. Correct the Gemara. This works out very good. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan said another member. Kiddush Yodav L'Truma Sadeshin. Rabbi Yochanan had another member we're introducing now. If you were Mekadesh your Yodayim L'Truma Sadeshin, which means you got up early in the morning, this was also this was at the bottom of Chafam Rav. But this was the third case of Rabbi Yochanan. You were Mekadesh Yodav L'Truma, which means you made Kiddush Yodayim V'Glaim an hour or two before Alois Shachar. L'machar ein tzarech l'kadesh. Come when it gets light, and now it's come to do the regular avodas of the day. You don't have to make another kiddush yadayim v'glaim. Shekvar kiddush mitchila savoda, because you already made kiddush yadayim v'glaim an hour ago, even though it was still dark. Now remember, we had two pshatim, right? We had two pshatim. Is it going to go to Rabbi Rebbe, and it's only midrabanan, or is it going to Rabbi Shimon, and he's not masking Tim and Ganson? Right? Those are the two pshatim we had yesterday.
The question is, how did he do it?
So that's what we're going to get into. I mean, how did he take the kir out? Right. So that's going to be part of the discussion. So the Mukum Lahik Rabbi Elazar. Rava learned that this halacha of Rabbi Yochanan was going according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon, and that's why L'machar Yitzchak L'Kadesh. We can say Ha Karebi. We could say that when Rabbi Yochanan said Ein Ma'aleyu Kol Halayla, it goes according to Rebbe. And he holds in Rebbe that the only time it becomes possible Lina is in the morning, and therefore he's saying like Rebbe, and he's saying don't take the kir out, because if you do, you might forget, and it'll become possible Lina in the morning. It'll fit perfectly. You shouldn't take it out. We still haven't taken care of how can you do Trumas Hadeshin.
Right.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But right now, the member that Rabbi Yochanan said Kiddush Yodav L'Trumas Hadeshin is going to go to Rabbi Shimon. So there's no problem. There's no psalina at all. So there's no issue how he took it out. There is no psalina. So his Kiddush Yadayim V'Reglaim that he did in the morning wouldn't be a problem. The water wouldn't either be possible. Nothing's possible either. There is no psalina. So therefore, there's no issue here. Now, when Rabbi Yochanan said Ein Maleyu, that would be according to Rebbe. And according to Rebbe, the cutoff would be Alois Shachar. And as long as you remember to put it before Alois Shachar, you'll be fine. Don't take it out at all, so you shouldn't forget. Ella Abaye demukum lakarebi, but Abaye who learned this member of Rabbi Yochanan that Kiddush Yadav L'Trumas Hadeshin L'Mocha and Tzarech L'Kadesh is going according to Rebbe. So then it's kosher to Rebbe. Then we're going to have a stira in Rebbe Shita. Why? Ma'ishna Hasam Damashkalei. Why did Rabbi Yochanan say in Rebbe that leave it in the whole night, don't take it out? But over here it says Kiddush Yadav L'Trumas Hadeshin. So obviously he took it out. How could you do Kiddush Yadayim V'Reglaim? So to answer your question, he had to have taken it out. But it doesn't say put it right back. It should say put it right back. Because if you leave it out and we pass Alois Shachar, it's going to pass on the water. So why is it that Rabbi Yochanan, when he was going according to Rabbi, said, make sure to leave it in, don't take it out. And over here, an hour before Alois, when you had to pull it out for the Trumas Hadeshin, Kiddush Yadayim Reglaim, Rabbi Yochanan didn't say, but you better put it right back. That's the kasha. Zok to Gemara, the Misalaklei, Vadim Ashkalei. No, we'll say that he takes it out and he puts it right back. Why didn't Rabbi Yochanan mention the first that he puts it back? Because Rabbi Yochanan was not talking about the water. When Rabbi Yochanan was talking about the water, he said, keep it on the ground. Here he's talking about the guy doing Kiddush Yadayim. He's talking about the person. The person could make Kiddush Yadayim Reglaim and he could stay. He's not discussing the issue of the water right now. He's focusing on something else. He's focusing on something else. So that's why he does. That's why he didn't mention anything. So the territory is the Masalach of the Mashka. You do, but that's not what he's discussing. Correct them, okay, but we're still not out of the woods because the hachi lemochar einay mekadesh. He said lemochar einay mekadesh. Now that, if you look at Rashi, is referring to a different Rabbi Yochanan. And if we look at Rashi, ihachi lemochar einay mekadesh, ihachi Rabbi Yochanan ukma. The Lila Apostle, if you're going to learn that according to Rabbi Yochanan, Shkia is not a concern at all. The only time the water becomes possible Lina is only by Alois. So Ulamacher Einim Mekadesh, how will those words make any sense? Ulamacher Einim Mekadesh. Why can't you? Why would you say that it wouldn't work? And Rashi explains, Amai Rabbi Yochanan, Mishmei de Ilfa. Why did Rabbi Yochanan say in the name of Ilfa, Mikadesh mimenu la'avodas laila? That was the memory at the top where you have a kiyar that you took out in the middle of the night. It says you could be Mikadesh mimenu la'avodas laila. Ulamach ain't Mikadesh. Why can't you be Mikadesh in the morning? Why can't you be Mikadesh in the morning? It didn't pass Alois. The Shemini Minei. From the Rabbi Yochanan at the top of Chav Amar Aleph, it sounds very much like once it was exposed in the middle of the night, it is possible for any Kiddush Yadayim Reglaim for a day halacha. Because if we look at that earlier Rabbi Yochanan, if it wasn't in the water a whole night from before Shkia, it's Mekadesh min avodas laila, but Mekadesh. But you cannot use it for avodas yom. Why not? The way we're saying now, the only problem is by Alois. Yet this Rabbi Yochanan is very mashma that if it's not in the bar by Shkia time, it's going to pass it. So how could you tell me that Rabbi Yochanan really holds that the only cutoff date we need to be worried about is Alois? So Zok to Gemara, Amai. And for the Gemara, it doesn't mean Ulamachar Ein Mekadesh that you can. It means Ein Tzarech Lekadesh. So it's very funny because even though we're talking about the status of the water, we're saying if it was out at night, you could be Mekadesh, Yadayim Reglaim for Haktar Shevarim, Ulamach Ein Mekadesh means, and tomorrow you'd have to Mekadesh is going back to the person. And tomorrow morning, once he did Kiddush Yadayim Reglaim at night, it will not, his personal Kiddush Yadayim Reglaim will not expire. Zok Gemara, remember, so what you're actually saying then is, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the lematirin michsa chazi, the water, in fact, will be good, even for matirin, as long as it didn't pass Alois. The fact that it was out of the bar overnight will not passel it for matirin. Zok Gemara, now the Gemara asks kasha, so then how do you do then that's why the Chisda's kasha. That's the Chisda's halacha. Zok Gemara, mitzvah shikur. The nafkamini is according to Reb Chisda, you don't have to leave it all night. You don't have to keep it in all night. Keep it out the whole time. According to Rabbi Yochanan, we say you should leave it in all night. So the Rashi asks, according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you should leave it in all night, so how could you pull it out in order to do Kiddush Yadayim Reglaim for Trumas Hadeshin? So Rashi answers, which probably you thought of automatically without even articulating it, is you have no choice. What are you supposed to do? He has to do Kiddush Yadayim Reglaim. So you take it out, and since we know we're right near Alois, we're not worried to leave it out. You take it out, you put it right back in. But if you have it out all night because different Kohanim are using it, they're coming and going to do avodah, then no one's going to be on top of it to make sure it's put back. But if you take it out for a short amount of time and put it right back in, there won't be an issue. Okay, Gewaltig. We're not done yet. But right now, we're at the point where Rabbi Yochanan holds that The only time it passes is by Alois, yet al Tegzera, you should leave it in the whole night. Okay, now there's one important point that I need to bring up. Very important point that I wanted to bring up. There was a Chiddush that Rashi said. I want to look at El Abaye do Ukim Lo Karebi Kasha de Rabbi Arabi. According to Abaye, who learns that the other Rebbeim also Rabbi, it's Shver Rabbi and Rabbi. Because in the case of Malayu, in the case of Rebbeim, don't take it out all night. It's mashma that it becomes possible by Shkia, but the other Rebbeim is mashma, it only becomes possible by Alois. So let's have a look at this Rashi, the third wide line. Aliba de Rebbe. Earlier, Rabbi Yochanan said, according to Rebbe, L'gzeiras shikua chayich. He's choshes for gzeiras shikua. V'hacha nami nishke. So over here also, you should make sure to keep it in the board the whole time. V'hacha leka lemisli taima b'moide Rebbe the mekrois hagever atzafer le'posla Lina. At the point in the Gemara where the Gemara asked, Ella l'Rebbe kasha the Rebbe ad the Rebbe. There's a very big difference, because in the case of where we only took it out for Trumas Hadeshan, the same way Rebbe said, the same way Abaye is understanding in Rebbe according to Rabbi Yochanan that just for an hour Lina would have possible, right? Vibaltin is only the Rabbanon. If he just washed an hour ago before Elois, his Kiddush Yadayim will work. So when the Gemara asked the Kasha, Rebbe and the Rebbe, why didn't the Gemara say the same thing? When Rabbi Yochanan said you have to leave it in the whole night, that's because it's because we're talking about for the night. If you take it out of the night, then there would be a psolina. But if you took it out right before Alois, just the same way his Kiddush Yadayim will work for the day. So let's say that the water also won't be possible either. Now let's say that whether or not the water becomes possible will parallel whether or not his Kiddush Yadayim will expire. If the water was exposed all night, meaning he only made Kiddush Yadayim yesterday, then the tak expires by Alois. But if he made Kiddush Yadayim an hour before Alois, there we say it doesn't expire. So why would the water expire? That's the problem that Rashi has at that point in the Gemara. So Rashi says a very important thing. So Zokt Rashi, V'hacha lecha lemisli taima b'moida Rabbi de Mekrais Hagever atafel le'posla. You can't say this svara that the water won't become possible because you only took it out an hour before Alois. The Bishlam Agabe Kiddush, when you're talking about whether or not his Kiddush Yadayim V'Glam expires, the Psulin the day Rabbanon, the Psulin is only Rabbanon for the person. Remember Rashi said, you know why it shouldn't expire? Because there is no Mayim here to expire. He dried his hands already. And that's why we say there's not really a Psulina. His expiry is only midrabanan, and therefore, if he just washed right before Alois, it won't expire for the day. But you can't make that chiluk by the make here. I will make here the hava kamon ukdushas kliyalein. It's mamish like meat of a carbon. The lina to the araisa. The lina will be the araisa. Therefore, amud hashachu degarim. So Rashi is speaking out that even if we have a tzad to say that the way Rabbi Yochanan understood Rebbe, the way Abaye explains it, is that Lina, the psulina is only with Rabbanon. That's the psulina of his Kiddush Yadayim V'Glaim expiring. But the parallel psulina that would be on the Mayim itself, that's the Raisa. That, even if you took it out a second before Alois, and Alois passed with the water not being in the bar, it's going to pass all the water. Okay, so let's take us to our next step. So right now we have three shitas. We have the first shita was Reb Chia bar Rav. The first shita was Reb Chia bar Yosef said that it becomes possible for avodas hayoyim by shkia. It becomes possible for avodas halayla by alois. Rabbi Yochanan holds it only becomes possible for everything by alois, but midrabanan, keep it in the whole night. So you shouldn't, by mistake, forget to leave it out. And according to Reb Chisda, there's no such concern as long as it's in a moment before alois. It will not become possible either. So those are three shittas. So Frank the Gemara, Meisva. The earliest person that got to work was the person that did Trumas Hadeshin. The Kaihanim that were sleeping in the Beis Hamikdash, in their cubbies, in their locker rooms, they didn't see him because they didn't light up the Azara. he worked in the light of the maracha, the little dwindling embers that were still on the mizbech, create a little glow. That was the light that the person who did Trumas Hadeshin used. They didn't hear his voice. He kept himself very quiet. You know what woke him up? Kol eitz she'asa ben katan muchani lakir. When they hear him operating the pulley system, that noise wakes him up. And they say Higia Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim Minakir. To show how to learn this, but Pasha says is the time has come. We better get up and we better do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. So basically, it's the noise of the Muchani operating. Let's have a quick look at Rashi. We're talking about the person who got the schus to do Trumas Hadeshin, B'Mesachas Tamid. He didn't bring any light with him. He just used the light that came off the Mizbeach. The Kohanim slept in the base of Moiked. There was a fire there. They kept them warm until they heard the noise of the Muchni. And then so Mizarz in this Atzman, they're Mizarz themselves. What happens is, the order of operation is he goes and takes with a silver shovel some ash that he puts beside the Mizbeach, and then they come up and they clean up the top surface of the Mizbeach, and they shovel all the ash from the whole surface of the Mizbeach into one big pile. It was called a tapuach because it was like a half a herb, a half a orb, a half an apple, so that's why it was called a tapuach. So the Gemara asks, what exactly is the scenario? My love, the Misalakle, Alma Mashkale. It must be that they heard him lifting, because the noise would only come when the Gemara thinks now the noise will only come when you're raising it up, because you only need the pulley system to hoist it out. Gravity will put it back in. You don't need any type of hoist operating. So you won't have all the gears clanking and moving. But when you're taking it out is when you have a problem. So Dr. Shemai Lav, Hi Shemias Koila Eit Tekatoni, the noise that they hear that wakes them up, the Solak Lelakir Minabar. That's when he's taking it out. Alma Mishukava. Obviously, it was in the bar all night, and he just pulled it out in the morning to do his Trumas Hadeshin. And therefore, Rab Chisda said until a moment before daybreak, they didn't put it in, because the whole concern is daybreak. It was Rab Yochanan who said they have to be there all night because we don't want you to forget. But Rab Chisda said they left it out all night, and only right before Shki they put it in to pass by. Right before, Alois, they put it in to pass by Alois. But from this story, it very much sounds like it was in the water all night, which supports Rab Yochanan, which is a kasha on Rab Chisda. So Zok to Gemara, my love, the Masalakle, Alma Mashkale. So you see, we pass on like Rabbi Yochanan. Zok Naloi, the Mashkale, for character who was out a whole night, he did his Kiddush Yadayim and they put it back in. There won't be any noise, lowering it down. Zok to Gemara, Mishkale Bil Gilgala. He puts it in with a Gilgala. Lishnachrina, the Mishkale B'Chomrase. They also lower it down with the same pulley system, not that they need to, because the gravity would put it in, but he bedafka lower it down in a noisy way, so that you should be able to hear it. And they'll hear it, and they'll come. So you're looking, what's the difference between these two pshatim? It seems to be saying exactly the same thing. And that's what the Mefarshim ask. But Tosfos learns a little different than Rashi. And Tosfos says that there is a difference between the two pshatim. And he says, "V'yeshloimer hanyu dekamar the mishkele begalgala labor v'koil shenishma hanyu boitziyim in abar umayleyu." Basically, you know what he would do? It was out a whole night, like Reb Chista said, and he would put it into the bar, and then he would take it out again. Not because he needed to take it out again. He took it out again just to make noise, and then he put it back in. So he literally did it twice. Why? Just to make the noise. That was one shot. The other shot is, the second shot is when he lowers it into the bar, he didn't just lower it plain, he used the pulley system, so the gear should also make noise. But it could be going like Reb Chista. Zok Gemara, why in the world do I need this alarm system? There was a Vecker there. Vahava Gavini Cruz, there was a Vecker whose name was Gavini, and he woke everybody up. That's not to be right. Betray carry avavli. They had a snooze button. The show mahai asi, the show mahai asi. Yeah, you had a second chance. It's exactly what it was. Zok more back there. Gufa. Amar Beishua Bchidina. Kol kior she'ein boy kedela. Okay, so we got through the difficult part, so it wasn't so bad after all. So Zok more Amar Yosy Simon Zevachim Kol kior she'ein boy kedela kadosh arba kayanim imenu ein mekachim. Right, we had that yesterday that the kior has to hold a minimum of 4 servings of water to do kiddush yadayim raglayim. Sheneva v'rachtem imenu Moshe v'Aaron uvan. Measure effective more. Kol ha'kelim mekachin. You don't have to use the kior. Any klei that has water in it, we learned this yesterday as well. You can use that for kiddush yadayim raglayim. Bein sheyesh ben revius. Say if there's a revius. Bein shein revius. Even if there's not even a revius. So clearly you shouldn't eat for 4 people. Well, that's you klei. So how could you say it has to have a minimum shear? You know when you don't need to have a revius, avada, the main receptacle that's holding the bulk water, has to hold for 4 people. The type of keli that we're talking about is if you drill the hole at the side of the kior and you put a little spigot that had a little bit of a clay kibble there it doesn't matter how much it holds. Why? Because you're relying on the kior that's holding all the water. So that's what this brush is talking about. Not that you're actually using a different keli to do kiddush yadayim raglayim. The other keli is just a flow-through keli that you're letting water drain out of the kior through that flow-through keli. Frank Gemara, but bechalal, how could you use any other keli to do kiddush yadayim raglayim? V'hami menu amarachmanu. We said it says v'rachtu mimenu. It had to be bedakta from the kior. How could you say any other klei would be good? So Gemara, but it also says yirchetzu. There it says yirchatzu open-ended. L'rabbois klei sharis, every klei would be allowed. Frankly, more if yirchatzu is open-ended, so why dakta klei sharis? Yachi klei choil nami. Any keli should be good to make kiddush yadayim raglayim with. Amar Abaye klei choil loy matzis amrit. You wouldn't be able to say that a klei choil would be kosher to do kiddush yadayim raglayim. Mikal v'chomer, because we have a kal v'chomer mikanoi from the base of the kior. The base of the kior was actually hollow. It could have held water, but it didn't. Umakanoi shenim shechimai. Madich, the base of the kior. That when they made the Mashiach with Shemin and Mishcha to be Mekadosh the kior, they also made the Mashiach on the kanoi. So it's mamish like the kior, but still ain't a Mekadosh. You cannot be Mekadosh with the kan of, you cannot use that kan as a receptacle to hold water. And we'll soon see how we know that. So Kleichoil, Shenim Shechimai. It wasn't even smeared with oil to give it kedusha like the kior was. Einoi din sheyim hakadosh. Frank Lamar. So how do you know the chanei minola? How do you know that the base of the kior you wouldn't be able to use also to make kiddush yadayim raglayim with? The Tanya of Yehuda Eimer Yachol Yekadei Mekadesh Kederech Shekir Mekadesh. You would have thought that you can use the kan also as a receptacle to hold water. Talmud Loimer Vasisa Kir Nechoshes V'Chan Nechoshes L'Rachta. Now, if the Torah would have wanted us to be makish the two and to say that they have the same halacha, meaning they both are mekadosh, it could have said vasisa is kior ves kanin nechoshes, but it specifies kior nechoshes, kanin nechoshes to tell us that l'nechoshes ikashtem. It's not really a hekesh. Rashi says the Torah is trying to tell us the only similarity that there is between the kan and the kior is that they both happen to be made out of nechoshes. But they don't share any other similarities. In other words, you couldn't do kiddush yadayim raglayim using just a base. Amalei Mazutra Bered Rav Mori l'Ravina Malakanoi Shekain also l'Toichai. You told me a kal v'chomer. You know why a regular keli couldn't be used? Because madich the kan you can't use, and that was nimshach together. Kol shekain another keli you can't use. That's not a kasha, because you know why you can't use the kan? Because the kan was never made to be a receptacle. It was it happens to be a hollow base, but it's a base. A keli is actually made to hold water. So forget maybe that you could make kiddush yadayim raglayim. It was made as a receptacle. Ella, we have another limud to tell us the difference between a regular keli and the kan. Ella mimenu lemute kleichoil. Frankly, Gemara, if mimenu is lemute kleichoil, then ihachi Kleisharis nami mimenu should say dafka the kior, not a kleichoil, but not any other kleisharis either. Tomorrow, harabi rachman yirchatzu. We have yirchatzu to be marbe a kleisharis. Frankly, marois why would you make a distinction and include a klei shares and not include a klei choil? Because that ton meshicha kamayu, because the klei shares has meshicha just like the kiyar. So therefore, that keli would be able to be used for kiddush yadayim reglaim. V'zeh ein ton meshicha kamayu, and we're not making a kal v'chomer anymore from kan because we slugged it up. Okay, we'll stop it and we'll be on tomorrow. Phew. It was much easier to say this than it was to prepare it. Now the Tosfos